In this video, I'm going to talk about exponents and roots. These are basically shortcut notations that tell us to perform certain math operations. So this is an example of an exponent situation. We have what we might refer to as 7 to the third power, or 7 to the exponent of 3. We refer to the 7 as the base. This is the number that's going to be multiplied by itself a certain number of times. The exponent is what tells us how many times we're going to multiply it. So in this case, we're going to multiply 7 times itself a total of 3 times. We would say this as 7 to the third, or 7 to the third power, or 7 to the exponent of 3. 7 to the third is probably the most common. And that's the math that we would do if we were going to kind of do this by hand. We're going to talk about doing it a little bit quicker in the calculator, but 7 times 7 times 7 is what's being communicated up here. So in this example, we have 5 to the second power. That means 5 times 5, and 5 times 5 is 25. So the reason that I'm showing this example is that 2 is the most common exponent. So we have kind of a special way to describe that. We call something with an exponent of 2 squared. So we would refer to this math up here on the left-hand side where we started as 5 squared. Now, let's talk about roots a little bit. Here we have what we would describe as the square root of 16. That means what number multiplied by itself will make the number. Which number multiplied by itself will make 16? So you can see we're describing this then as the square root of 4 times 4, because 4 times 4 is 16. So the answer to this is 4. It's kind of undoing a square. It's the opposite of squaring. Since 4 times 4 is equal to 16, the square root of 16 is 4. That gets a little bit confusing, but for the most part, we're going to rely on the calculator to do our squares and square roots. So this is the button that you're going to use, and you're going to use it for both squares and square roots. Now, let me explain that. There's a few functions where we have to do this. If we click this button, we are going to get the square of whatever number is in the calculator. So let's say that we want 5 squared. We would click the number 5, we'd click the x squared button, and we would immediately get our answer of 25. If we want a square root, we have to do something slightly different. We're going to click the second button first, but we're still going to click this button. But because we click the second button first, we're getting the square root function, which is the symbol right above that key. Let me show you that on the calculator. I'm going to pull up my calculator here. Just a moment. There we go. So I'm going to do what I just described, 5, and then I click. This looks a little bit different, but it's really the same as your calculator. I click on the x squared button and then enter. And I get, you can see that it shows me 5 to the second power, or 5 squared, is 25. Now, if we want to undo that and take a square root, we have to do it a little bit differently. We're going to click the second key, then the x squared button. But because we click the second key, it gives us the square root function, and we can clearly see that. And then we type our number in at the end, and it goes underneath that square root symbol. Then we click enter, and you can see that we get back to 5. So that's how we can kind of go back and forth. Let me do that square root thing one more time. Second square root. Let's do the square root of 49. And we click enter, and we get our answer, which is 7. All right, let's turn back to our presentation here. So the square and the square root button are really the same button. For the square x squared, we enter the number before and then click the button and then enter. For the square root, we're going to enter our number afterwards. So second x squared button and then our number. For other exponents, sometimes your exponent will not be 2. For that, we have to use the button that's directly above the x squared button. I call that the hat key because it kind of looks like a hat. How to use it? You type in the base. Let's go back to our original example of 7 to the 3rd power. We type in the number 7. Then we click the hat key. Then we type in our exponent. And then we hit enter. Let me go back to my calculator and we'll do that problem. I'm going to clear that off. So I click our base of 7. I click the hat key. Notice it gives me a little spot to put my exponent. I put in the exponent of 3 and I click enter. And there's our answer, 343. Now, just to point out, we can enter whatever number. Decimals work just as well. For instance, I can put in 7.5, hat key, second power, enter. Works perfectly well with decimals as well. All right, let's keep moving. Let's do a few example problems here. All right, I'd like you to be using your calculator to practice these along with me, although the first 2, at least, you should not need a calculator for. So 2 squared means 2 times 2. Or you can use the x squared key, and that gives us an answer of 4. 3 to the 2nd power, or 3 squared, means 3 times 3. That's 9. It's helpful to memorize some of these common squares for integers between 1 and 10. 11 squared, that means 11 times 11. This might be one you'd want to use your calculator for. 11 times 11, or 11 squared, is 121. All right, now we get into some decimals. This is something you definitely want to use your calculator for. Just as a reminder, this means 6.3 times 6.3. That gives us an answer of 39.69. Here we have something to an exponent other than 2. 3 to the 3rd power means 3 times 3 times 3. That gives us 27. And then finally, we have a decimal to the 3rd power, just as we did in the calculator. Just as a reminder of what this means, times 4.5 times 4.5. The 3 is telling us how many times we are multiplying 4.5 together. And for that, you should get 91.125. Don't make the common mistake of thinking that the exponent and the base get multiplied together. 11 to the 2nd power does not mean 11 times 2 or 22. All right, let me clear that off. And we'll move on to our last example problems here. These are the roots. The square root of 25. These first 2 are ones that you should be able to do without a calculator. These require a little bit of memorization. The square root of 25 is 5. And the reason for that is that 5 times 5 equals 25. That's why 5 is the correct answer. The square root of 49 is 7. And that's because 7 times 7 equals 49. Now we get into some that you will definitely want to use your calculator for. So remember, for this, you need to hit the 2nd button, then the x squared key, and then you're going to put in 2.25, click enter, and you should get 1.5 for that answer. This last one's kind of interesting. second button, x squared button to get the square root symbol, the number 10, and your calculator is going to give you the same thing back as an answer. That's a little bit confusing, but hit the toggle button, that button that's right above your enter key, looks like this, and that will convert your square root to a decimal. And you should get something like 3.162 as your answer. Occasionally that will happen. It's a correct answer to the problem, but it's not the answer that you're looking for. Most of the time you want a decimal, so you will have to use that toggle button occasionally. All right, that's all I've got for exponents and roots at this point. Now it's time for some practice on your own.